How do I stop myself from feeling so lonely? Why do I feel so lonely? Do you remember times in your life when you've really felt, I wish I just had someone to talk to. I wish there was somebody who could get me. I wish there was somebody who could just understand who I am, or that I have so much to offer, and there's no one there. There's no one there. And could it be that I'm just destined to live my life all alone? Here's the thing. We are uncomfortable being alone, and that's what gives us a feeling of being lonely. One. The other reason why we have that feeling of being lonely is when we are disconnected with the whole of us, right? 3, we are feeling lonely because it is reminiscent of a time in our childhood when we felt abandoned, when someone might have left us. It's amazing, and this still happens to date, that because our children are so resilient, we almost take them for granted and their feelings, and we never realize the consequences of our actions. They can be so far-reaching, such that if you are to leave your child in a car maybe, or you're leaving your child at home and you're just going off for a walk or anything, it might trigger in them a feeling that, Mom, Dad, nobody's going to come back for me. Where's everybody? And I actually remember a time like this in my life when I was very little, and I think we'd all had an afternoon nap. And when I woke up, there was nobody there. It was just myself. And I remember, the last thing I remember was I had my family around me, and the next thing, there was nobody. And that feeling of hollow feeling, it's a really icky feeling of, oh my God, I've been left. Nobody loves me. I've been abandoned, right? So despite the fact that everybody came back and they just stepped out, but they all came back, to wake up to that feeling, it took a lot of effort for me to stop feeling like that whenever I woke up. So our feelings of loneliness are more exacerbated the more we resist that loneliness. So when you're feeling lonely, dive into it and try to assess why you're feeling lonely, right? One of the major reasons that we feel lonely is because we are dependent on the outside of us to make us feel warm, to make us feel safe, to make us feel connected, and that we are not alone. When we can get comfortable showing up for ourselves and being there for ourselves, right? And you embrace you being alone. You embrace and you become your own reference point, but only this time you become your own reverence point. And you become comfortable with that feeling, and if anything, you might end up really craving your alone times. And that feeling of loneliness is no longer a loneliness, because as soon as you connect to yourself, you're there. But it doesn't happen just so I connect with myself and I'm just going to connect with myself. No, you've got to go through why you're feeling lonely and identify. And most of the times we are unable to identify that indeed we are feeling lonely, because we never give ourselves a chance to feel lonely, right? We fill our time. We're either watching something, talking to somebody, on the phone, reading a book, going, doing all sorts of things. Very rarely do we give ourselves a chance to do nothing. And it's not even about doing nothing, but to shut off all comfort zones, all emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is if you're feeling out of sorts or you're feeling emotionally imbalanced, we'll either call a friend, we'll speak to our family, there'll be somebody or there'll be something you do. You may start eating a lot, you may decide to drink, but there is something that we do to allow us to cope with that feeling, right? So when we can shut all of this down, and then we know whether we have that feeling of loneliness, right? And then you really go dive deep into what that level of loneliness is. In a way, loneliness is a point that we need to traverse. It's a point that we need to get through to becoming zero, to going back to ground zero. And it really gives us that opportunity to hit rock bottom from which you can then start whatever it is that you want to start. So loneliness is a very, very important, right? So you've got to, in a way, use that level of loneliness for you to get to you. Try not to resist anything. And things like pain, loneliness, feeling lost, feeling depressed, feeling, I think a good 60% of people who see me will have problems around this area, that I'm lost, I'm lonely, I'm feeling depressed. And most of us get to that point because we're missing something in our lives. There's an element to our life that's not there. Yeah? And it's a part of us that's missing in action. Some call it the soul of us. Some call it the part of us that went missing when we were traumatized, because our soul gets fragmented. There's different ways of looking at it, but it all boils down to one thing, that you are missing in action with yourself, right? Embrace your loneliness, get to know yourself, and really fall in love with the factor of you. Lots of love. Don't forget to subscribe.